When I opened the trunk of my husband's SUV to get the coat he had forgotten last night, what fell at my feet wasn't the coat, but a lace lingerie set from his mistress, from Victoria's Secret. I didn't scream. Instead, I prepared a gift box and sent it to his mistress's parents' house, turning their Christmas into complete chaos. Boston in December always carries a beauty all its own. The Back Bay streets dusted with snow, Christmas lights strung across balconies, and the faint scent of fresh pine drifting from the tiny shops along Boylston Street. I, Angela Parker, 35, had grown used to the feeling of stepping into my brownstone every evening and thinking that my 7-year marriage, while not overly romantic, was steady enough to believe in. That evening was no different. Graham sent me a single text. Meeting a client downtown. Parking's a nightmare, so I took an Uber. I replied with our usual heart emoji, then headed to the garage to grab the shearling coat he'd left in the trunk of the Range Rover the night before. I remember the snow falling so lightly, it barely made a sound as it touched the ground. When I opened the trunk, all I wanted was to grab the coat and get back inside. But a pink Victoria's Secret bag dropped straight onto my boots, stopping me in my tracks. I bent down, opened the bag, and saw something I knew at just a glance wasn't meant for me. A red lace lingerie set, size L. A strange heat rushed to my face, even though the garage was filled with nothing but cold air. I flipped over the receipt inside, $177. Paid with our shared credit card. A small number, but it felt like someone had just smashed a glass pane inside my chest. Graham hadn't bought me lingerie since our wedding night, and I, who always wore size S, couldn't find a way to interpret that L in any gentle light. I stood next to the Range Rover for a few more seconds, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in the garage door, thinking of the snowy days from past years when Graham and I still laughed together in the kitchen, drinking hot cocoa, but that memory now felt like breath on glass, fading the moment it touched, then gone. I didn't scream, I didn't rage, I didn't jump to conclusions. I brought the bag upstairs, placed it on the kitchen counter, and stood staring at it like some foreign object had dropped into my life. Part of me tried to summon a reasonable explanation, maybe a gift for a female colleague, a cousin, someone in the family. But the truth was painfully clear. Graham was not the kind of man to buy thoughtful gifts, and even less the kind to forget them in the trunk like that. I couldn't force myself to sleep with a burning question smoldering in my chest. So instead of going upstairs, I opened my laptop right there in the kitchen, hands trembling slightly, but my mind strangely clear. I knew this moment was the line between the marriage I once believed in, and a truth I had no choice but to confront. The laptop screen lit up, casting a cold blue glow across the granite countertop. I opened the credit card app first, my heart pounding with each transaction that appeared. Ostra on Friday night, the night I had a late shift. The Liberty Hotel on a Sunday afternoon. I remembered clearly I'd been at the orthodontic clinic all day. AMC Theater 2 weeks ago, the night I came home, and Graham said he was tired and going to bed early. Each entry aligned like footprints a betrayer had left in the snow. I didn't stop. I opened Graham's Google timeline, something I never imagined I'd need to check. The tiny green dots mapped out each route with chilling precision. To Ostra, to the Liberty, to AMC, over the past 4 months. Not a single outing missing, not a minute off. But the hardest blow came when I opened his TikTok, the app he scrolled through every night before sleep. This time, the entire recent video list was filled with short yoga clips from a young woman, Sienna Hartley, 27, a trainer at a studio in Seaport. She smiled, stretched, twisted her body, while the recently viewed section plainly stated, viewed 47 times. I placed a hand over my chest, as if someone had just gripped my heart and squeezed. Still no screaming, no anger, just the truth rising like steam hitting cold air. I took a deep breath, steadying my trembling hands as I carried out each step. I took screenshots of every transaction, downloaded the PDF of our bank statement, saved the Google timeline, and exported his TikTok history file by file. Everything went into a new folder named December Evidence, a name colder and more painful than any words I could have said. By the time I saved the last file, it was nearly midnight, but I no longer felt sleepy. What I felt was awake. And I knew one thing. Every layer of dust that had covered the truth these past months was being swept away, piece by piece. 3 days later, on Friday evening, Graham put on his coat and said in that familiar tone, "Important client meeting. I'll probably be home late." Those words, if spoken a few months ago, I might have believed without question. But now, each syllable sounded like rotted wood. One gentle touch, and it would all fall apart. When the door closed behind him, I stood for a moment in the dim living room, listening to the Boston wind whistling through the cracks, as if it were urging me to act. I grabbed my keys, pulled on my coat, and drove the Subaru Outback out of the garage. He was taking an Uber, which meant I knew exactly which car to follow without being noticed. I kept a distance of 2 or 3 cars, not close enough to draw attention, but close enough to spot the soft blue glow of the Uber ahead. Snow fell lightly, and the roads were slick, but every sense in me felt more awake than ever. The Uber turned onto Charles Street, lined on both sides with elegant Georgian brick houses, and finally stopped in front of a place I never expected to see under these circumstances, the tiny cafe in Beacon Hill, where Graham had knelt to propose to me 12 years ago. I slowed down and parked across the street, the blinking turn signal reflecting off the thin layer of snow. Through the fogged-up window, I saw Graham step out, brush snowflakes from his coat, and stand waiting. And just 2 minutes later, Sienna appeared, young, glowing, wrapped in a beige wool scarf. She ran toward him, threw her arms around his neck, and Graham tilted his head and kissed her, naturally, gently, as if it were something he had done 1,000 times before, in front of me. I didn't cry out. I didn't burst into tears. I simply raised my phone, opened the camera, and recorded exactly 30 seconds. Every touch, every smile, every intimate movement that was supposed to belong only between husband and wife. When the video ended, I set the phone down on the passenger seat. I didn't watch it again. My hands didn't tremble. I simply turned the car around and drove off, slowly rolling down the little hill of Beacon Hill, where the old-fashioned street lamps cast warm light over the fresh snow. I left in silence. And yes, not a single tear fell. Because I understood. It was time I stopped crying over things someone else had deliberately broken. When the Subaru pulled into the garage and the engine cut off, the silence in the house felt colder than the Boston wind outside. I stepped inside, took off my gloves, and paused in the hallway, as if my body needed a few seconds to adjust to a new reality. My husband was cheating on me, and I had seen it with my own eyes. But the part of me that had endured his indifference all these years, the steady, quiet part, pushed me forward. I walked straight to the bedroom, opened our shared closet, and immediately began rifling through the row of jackets. I knew Graham had a habit of hiding important things in his blazer pockets, the kind he wore only for major meetings or upscale events. I pulled out each one, checked every pocket. And in the navy blazer he wore least, I heard the faint metallic clink as I reached into the inner pocket. It was a small silver key, the kind used for filing cabinets, and I knew I had just touched something Graham never wanted me to find. The locked cabinet sat in his home office, tucked by the window wall, the room he always kept closed with a "don't come in, I'm working" excuse. In 7 years of marriage, I had never opened it. But this time, I slid the key into the lock, turned it, and the door swung open as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside was a thick file bundle tied with an old rubber band. When I pulled it out, the first page made me freeze. G.H. Realty Holdings, LLC. Owner, Graham Parker. No co-owner, no mention of my name, no explanation. I laid the file on the desk and began photographing each page with my phone. Business license, tax filings with the state of Massachusetts, operating reports. Everything was immediately sent to Mia with a short message. "Can you check this for me? As fast as possible." The following pages were bank statements. Multiple payments ranging from a few thousand to tens of thousands of dollars, all marked commission, private income, funneled into an account I had never seen. My heart pounded when I reached the page stamped in bright blue ink. Deposit $100,000, 1 Dalton Residences. Beneficiary, Sienna Hartley. My hands turned ice cold. Not from winter, but because that name, the one I had only known through TikTok, through 47 views, was now tied to the down payment for a penthouse worth over $1 million. My phone buzzed just as I was staring at Graham's signature on the contract. Mia was calling, her voice low and grave. Angela, I checked. This is a shell company. He created it just to hide money from you. And that $100,000 deposit? It's undeclared income. He never reported it to the IRS. I closed my eyes for a second. Not to cry, but to affirm that everything I was seeing, everything I had just uncovered, was the true portrait of the marriage I had clung to in denial for the past 7 years. I opened my eyes and saw the phone still lit up. Mia was still on the line. She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then added, in a tone I had never heard from her before, equal parts fury and pity, Angela, there's one more thing, and I think you need to hear it. I leaned against the desk, feeling like my body had to steady itself to keep from collapsing. Mia spoke slowly, as if every word needed to be placed just right. Last year, Graham was reprimanded by his former firm for accepting under-the-table commissions directly from clients. In Massachusetts, that's a serious violation. He almost got fired and nearly lost his brokerage license. I stood frozen. He had told me it was just a misunderstanding with a client, and I had believed him. Believed all of it. Believed it so fully, I never asked a second time. Mia took a deep breath and continued, as if opening the second door to truth. And one more thing. 6 months ago, a former colleague of Graham's sent an anonymous email to you. I just found it in your spam folder. The message said, Graham is not honest. Watch the joint account. I had to sit down on the chair next to the desk. My legs felt like they had lost their strength. I remembered then my Gmail had been overwhelmed with spam from the PTA and clinic ads. Maybe I had skimmed past the email without reading closely. Or maybe I had just trusted my husband too much to suspect anything at all. A chill ran down my spine like a fine electric thread, not from the Boston winter, but from a realization arriving far too late. This marriage hadn't just begun to crack. It had been rotting from within for a long time. I just hadn't seen it. The layers of lies, the hidden money, the sweetly crafted excuses, all of it had built a thick wall I'd been living beside for 7 years without even knowing. And now, brick by brick, that wall was collapsing, exposing a raw truth I could no longer ignore. Not even for another second. But the strangest thing was, I didn't collapse. I didn't run to confront him. I didn't wake Graham in the middle of the night. Instead, a chilling calm took over me. The kind of calm only those who have been betrayed to their core can possess. I knew I had to stay silent. Silent, so I could prepare. For the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I smiled and chatted, decorated the Christmas tree in the living room, hung every ornament Graham liked. I cooked dinner as usual, even joined him at church on Sundays, sitting hand in hand beneath the warm yellow lights, like a happy couple. He had no idea I knew everything. He saw nothing in my eyes but the practiced normalcy I rehearsed in front of the mirror each night. I played the part so well that even I sometimes felt a strange awe at myself. And beneath every fake smile, I silently laid the groundwork for my own nuclear strike. One evening, I knocked on the door of my neighbor, a woman who lived just 1 unit over, who used to work as a freelance UPS driver. When I told her I wanted to borrow her old UPS uniform, she looked at me curiously, but still handed over the neatly folded brown outfit. I just smiled and thanked her, offering no further explanation. Then came the gift box. I ordered an elegant box from a handcrafted shop in South End. Ivory white, gold trimmed, tied with a shimmering golden ribbon. I placed the red lace lingerie, Graham's gift for Sienna, at the center of the tissue paper. Finally, I wrote a card on red silk paper. Sienna, you left this in my husband's car. Merry Christmas, Angela. My handwriting was soft, rounded, polite, so neat that no one could read it and think I was trembling or angry. To make sure everything would be recorded, I ordered a mini wearable camera online, the kind that turns on with a simple tap. It was the size of a button, capable of recording both audio and HD video. Once it arrived, I clipped it to my sweater, looked in the mirror, and checked the angle. Nothing would be missed, not even the smallest expression. The final task, the most crucial, I assigned to Mia. She drafted the full divorce paperwork with lethal clauses, giving me 75% of our assets, including the brownstone in Back Bay, all joint holdings, and the right to request a forensic audit of Graham's hidden funds if he refused to sign. When Mia sent the draft, I read every line, every clause, leaving no detail untouched. For the first time in years, I felt like I was reclaiming the autonomy I had surrendered to my husband without even realizing it. 3 weeks passed like this, a double life. On the outside, I was the sweet wife preparing for Christmas. On the inside, I was a woman constructing, brick by brick, the most precise revenge of her life. Just when I thought I had every card in my hand, an unexpected detail emerged, not from Graham, but from Sienna herself. That night, as I lay on the sofa reviewing footage from the mini camera, my phone suddenly lit up with a notification from Instagram. I didn't follow Sienna, but her account was public, and when her avatar popped up under Suggested, I instinctively tapped it. The first photo made me sit upright. Sienna in a burgundy evening dress, showing off long legs and a bare shoulder glistening under flashlighting. The caption was a single sentence. Skipped yoga tonight to go on a date, followed by a bright red heart. But what made me clutch the phone wasn't the dress or her confident gaze. It was the car seat she was sitting on. I recognized the chrome door handle and the small scratch on the left panel. It was the car Graham always refused to get fixed, saying, "No one notices it anyway." I noticed. I always noticed. And now, that scratch sat boldly behind my husband's mistress. I felt the blood in my body pause, not from pain, but from the sharp clarity of truth. Sienna wasn't just a mistress. She flaunted it, publicly, treating Graham's car like some luxury prop for a thirst trap. Then, like a line of dominoes tipping, I remembered an alternate account I'd seen Graham use years ago for messaging. I tried logging in, and oddly enough, the password hadn't changed. In the trash folder, I found a few deleted messages, not yet permanently erased. One was from Sienna. Is your favorite penthouse still available? If everything goes well, I'll move in early next year. I told you, beautiful women deserve generous men. I leaned back in my chair, hands slightly trembling, not from shock, but from the sheer disgust blooming in my chest. Graham hadn't just betrayed me. Sienna was using him, like a designer wallet, and she knew exactly what she was doing. Curious, I kept digging and discovered her yoga studio, the one Graham always praised as energetic and welcoming, was in financial trouble, 3 months deep in losses due to low attendance. An anonymous review under 1 star read, "She flirts with any man with money. It's exhausting to watch." I sat quietly in the living room, golden light reflecting off the window glass and snow falling outside on Beacon Hill. The truth became clearer than the surface of the Charles River at dawn. Sienna wasn't a victim. She wasn't deceived by Graham. They were using each other, and I was the only one who hadn't realized I was standing in the middle of a transaction dressed up as romance. And in that moment, I knew my revenge plan wasn't just right, it was more necessary than ever. So when Christmas night arrived, everything was ready, like a stage I had quietly directed from the shadows. At exactly 7:30 p.m., I dressed in the deep brown UPS uniform, pulled a knit cap down low over my face, clipped the mini camera to my lapel, and checked the battery one last time. From afar, I looked into the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not Angela Parker, the gentle orthodontist, but a woman who had walked through pain and emerged with power. I drove the Subaru Outback out of Back Bay, past the crowds heading to church along Boylston Street, and turned toward Newton. The houses there glowed brightly with wreaths on doors, string lights wrapped around white fences, and I could spot the Hartley house immediately by the cluster of parked cars along the curb. I parked a short distance away, turned off my headlights, took a deep breath, and picked up the elegant gift box. Ivory, gold-trimmed, tied with a golden ribbon shimmering under the porch lights. I walked up the steps and knocked twice. Within seconds, the door swung open, and a kind-looking older woman appeared. Mrs. Doris, Sienna's mother. She wore a scarf and still shivered lightly in the cold, smiling warmly. "It's freezing. Come inside, sweetheart. No need to stand out here." I bowed slightly, keeping my voice low and curt like a professional delivery person. "Just dropping off a package that needs a signature, ma'am." But she stepped aside, inviting me in. And as I entered, warmth rushed over my face. The living room glowed with Christmas lights, a tall tree by the window, the scent of roasted turkey and apple pie filling the air. The long dining table in the center was set for 14. Grandparents from Rhode Island, aunts, uncles, siblings, kids passing around candy. No one suspected who I really was. To them, I was just a UPS driver with a late delivery. One of Sienna's cousins laughed and called out, "Another yoga student gift for Sienna. She's famous this year." I offered only a polite smile, stepped up to the table, and placed the gift box beside the golden turkey and pie. The ribbon shimmered under the lights, making the box stand out like a luxurious present from an anonymous admirer. No one knew that inside was not a gift. It was the truth. A truth powerful enough to blow this cozy dinner apart. I stepped back slightly, keeping my eyes steady beneath the pulled-down beanie and high-collared UPS uniform. Mrs. Doris walked over, wiping her hands on a red apron embroidered with snowflakes, smiling gently as she untied the golden ribbon and lifted the lid of the box, completely unaware that her life was about to change course. The moment the lid flipped open, the red lace lingerie burst into view like a jarring slash of color amid the soft pastels of Christmas. The room's atmosphere froze, as if someone had shut off every heater. Doris tilted her head, confused, while murmurs began to ripple through the dinner table. Then the card slid out of the tissue paper, landing on the table with a softness that echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Hartley, Sienna's father, picked it up and read aloud, his voice catching at the final line. "Sienna, you left this in my husband's car. Merry Christmas. Angela Parker." A second of silence shattered, as he stood abruptly, his chair crashing to the floor behind him. "Sienna, what is this?" Sienna, seated at the far end of the table, went pale as if drenched in ice water. Her mouth opened, but not a word came out. One of the nieces, maybe 8 or 9, blurted out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did Aunt Sienna sleep with Auntie Angela's husband?" A spoon clattered onto a plate. Another child began crying. Doris clutched her chest, mouth trembling, while Sienna only shook her head weakly. I took a light step forward, my voice calm, so calm even I felt the chill in it. "If anyone needs more proof, I have a video of them kissing last night." The room seemed to lose all its air. No one remained seated or still. Mr. Hartley slammed a hand on the table. An aunt clutched a child protectively, and Sienna, like her strength had completely drained, collapsed to the floor, hands over her face. But I wasn't done. I knew the final blow had to be about money, the truth that would strip away any last defense. I looked directly at Mr. and Mrs. Hartley and said very slowly, "The one Dalton penthouse your daughter's about to move into was bought with illegal money." Doris let out a strangled sob, her body folding forward as if she couldn't breathe. Mr. Hartley stared at his daughter with a look I would never forget. Pure, absolute disappointment. No one told me to leave. No one said another word. They didn't have to. I turned and walked out just as church bells rang faintly in the distance, Calling for Christmas Eve service, the sound rang through the snowfall like a quiet benediction. Not for me, but for the Hartley family. As the door closed behind me, the warmth of that house remained inside. I stepped into the winter night, leaving behind a truth none of them would ever be able to forget. The snow was falling heavier as I opened the car door, a gust of cold wind slapping my face into a strange kind of clarity. My hands were still trembling slightly, not from grief, but from adrenaline still rushing through my veins after the final blow I had just delivered. I shut the door, turned on the heat, and in the soft glow of Newton's streetlights, I pulled out my phone. Not to cry, not to seek comfort, but to finish my revenge, exactly as planned. I opened my anonymous Facebook account, the one I had created last year, just to browse a few Boston women's forums. The interface came up blank, no friends, no profile picture, just a generic name no one would recognize. I tapped New Post, my fingers moving fast, like I had rehearsed this 100 times. The 30-second clip, Graham and Sienna kissing in the same cafe where he once proposed to me, was uploaded first. Then the photo of the red lace lingerie resting on the Hartley dining table, lit starkly by Christmas lights. And finally, the card with the familiar message, Sienna, you left this in my husband's car. I hit post. That was all. As light and final as shutting the door on a house already rotting from within. 10 minutes later, the notifications exploded. 82 comments. 10 minutes after that, 340. By the time I turned the car out of Newton, the count had passed 2,000 within 30 minutes. I read a few of the top comments and immediately knew the storm had begun. Oh my God, she's my yoga instructor. Refund me now, never stepping into that studio again. Disgusting, she's been lying for 3 months to get out of classes. Homewrecker. Then came the longer DMs from female clients. She flirted with my husband during Friday night classes. I saw her in a luxury car with some random guy. Refund or I'm suing. It wasn't just her clients. The church community Sienna was part of had seen it too. A user named Parish Youth Committee commented bluntly, "We're reporting this to Father. This behavior is unacceptable." And 10 minutes later, the official page of St. Catherine's posted a short but piercing announcement. Sienna Hartley is suspended from the youth committee until further notice. I stared at that post and exhaled slowly. Not with smugness, but with relief. As if, for the first time in years, the weight crushing my chest had finally lifted. I shifted the car into gear, driving out of Newton as the streetlights flickered like tiny stars across the windshield. My revenge wasn't over, but it had begun exactly the way I wanted it to. When I pulled into the garage of our Back Bay brownstone, the dashboard clock clicked to 9:47 p.m. I turned off the engine, sat still for a few seconds, letting the heater's warmth fade from my face before stepping into a house lit only by the blinking Christmas tree. I had just hung up my coat when I heard hurried footsteps outside, then pounding on the door like someone had lost control. "Angela, open the door!" I was already in the living room when Graham burst through. His face was pale, hair disheveled, coat still dusted with snowflakes, and his eyes so frantic I knew he'd seen the video, and all the thousands of comments beneath it. His voice teetered between panic and blame, trembling but still trying to shout, "You humiliated me in front of all of Boston!" The way he said it, he, the one who cheated, blaming me, made me almost laugh. But I didn't move. My expression didn't change. I picked up my phone, opened the 30-second video from Beacon Hill, and held it up in front of him, letting the Christmas lights reflect off the image of his mouth kissing Sienna's. There was no explanation left for him. Graham stared at the screen, lips trembling. It was just a mistake, once. The oldest, weakest excuse in the book. I didn't reply. I simply walked around him to the dining table and picked up the thick black folder. When I dropped it onto the granite surface, the sound was sharp enough to make him flinch. G.H. Realty Holdings. L.L.C. The hidden accounts. the illegal commissions, the $100,000 deposit for one Dalton, all laid bare. He looked at them like they were the wreckage of his life, but in truth, they were only a mirror of himself. I pulled out a chair, sat across from him, and slid Mia's divorce agreement in front of him. My voice was calm, so calm it made the room feel colder. Sign, or tomorrow morning, the IRS and your brokerage get this entire file. Graham turned ghost white. He looked at me like he hoped I might still show mercy, but every drop of trust, love, and patience had left me long ago. At the moment, I saw him kiss another woman in the cafe, where he once proposed. His hand shook violently as he picked up the pen. His signature slanted wildly, like the final thread of a marriage snapping apart. When he set the pen down, a defeated sigh escaped his throat, small but heavy, like surrender. I picked up the signed contract, looked at him for one long second, and then signed my name at the bottom. The ink soaked into the paper as gently as falling snow. I looked up and spoke the final words. The end of a 7-year marriage and the beginning of my freedom. Merry Christmas, Graham. I folded the divorce agreement shut, the soft rustle of the paper echoing like a final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Graham stood frozen in the living room, his face twisted more by fear than remorse. And I, for the first time in 7 years, felt a stillness within me, like I was simply listening to the sound of snow falling outside the window. But the world outside wasn't still. It began to collapse, precisely along the lines where the truth had been buried. The news spread as fast as a winter storm. While I sat on the sofa sipping hot cocoa, the first post appeared on my feed. A woman from Newton asking if anyone had a temporary room for Sienna Hartley because her parents kicked her out into the 27-degree Fahrenheit night. The Hartleys had thrown her out that very night, allowing her nothing but a small handbag. They didn't yell. They were disappointed. And sometimes, disappointment hits harder than rage. Just hours later, a photo was posted on Yelp, the glass door of Sienna's Seaport yoga studio, now covered in white paper, with a scrawled message, "Temporarily closed. No formal announcement needed." The moral scandal had spread, clients demanding refunds, and other women came forward with troubling accounts, enough to shut the studio down for good. By the next afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop. Mia sent a link from the Massachusetts real estate notary system. The one Dalton penthouse contract had been voided. The listed reason: unverified source of funds, suspected illegal activity. I stared at that line longer than I needed, not because it shocked me, but because it confirmed what I'd known from the start. Truth carries more weight than any lie. And Graham? The consequences came fast, like snow melting under the morning sun. A longtime client posted, "We've ended our partnership with Graham Parker. Our company values trust." Then came the second client. Then the third. Finally, his brokerage issued an internal memo. Graham had been terminated for non-transparent conduct, damaging to company reputation. Boston is smaller than it seems. Rumors spread faster than the wind on the Charles River. Within a week, no one wanted to do business with Graham, even those who once called him the best broker in Back Bay. I heard through mutual friends that Graham couldn't hold out in Boston. And so, he packed up what was left, drove out of the city, and returned to his parents' farm in Philadelphia. The place he grew up, the place he never felt proud of, the place he once swore he'd never go back to. But life has a strange way of circling back. Those who betray to climb higher often return to where they started. As for me, I simply stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the windowpane, and embraced one simple truth. Consequences don't need to be pushed. They find their way to the right people. And as I looked at the quiet stillness of the house that day, I realized something more important. Everything was shifting, not toward Graham anymore, but toward me. In the weeks that followed, life didn't just return to normal. It got better in ways I had never imagined. One Monday morning, while I was reorganizing treatment schedules at the clinic, the hospital director walked in with a thick folder and a warm smile. "Angela, we'd like to promote you to head of aesthetic dentistry." I froze for a moment. It wasn't pride I felt, but the sense of finally being seen, after so many years standing silently behind my husband's career. The new contract opened before me, like a true beginning. More responsibility, a stronger voice, and a salary that meant I'd never have to worry about my future again. And then, an idea I had long carried quietly began to take form. An idea about helping other women. I signed a lease on a small penthouse in Seaport, facing Boston Harbor, where white sailboats crossed every afternoon. I didn't live in it. I turned it into a counseling and financial planning space for women, a safe place to walk in, set down their pain, and walk out with tools to protect themselves. On opening day, only 4 women showed up, but they brought stories so much like mine. My chest tightened with each word, and I knew I was doing the right thing. A week later, the Boston Globe ran a nearly full-page article with the bold headline, "The Woman Who Turned Pain into Power." A photo of me, standing by the penthouse window, sunlight in my hair, was captioned, "From betrayed wife to guiding light for hundreds of Boston women." The story spread. Women from Back Bay, Beacon Hill, Newton began sharing their stories, tagging my name, calling me a spark, proof that rising is real. The voice we need in this era. I never saw myself as a role model. But as I walked through hospital corridors, led small workshops, and facilitated support groups I had started, the way they looked at me reminded me of something simple, yet powerful. I had survived. And because of that, I could help them survive too. That thought lingered in my mind one summer afternoon as I sat in the penthouse office, sunlight slanting through the tall glass windows, casting golden warmth across the desk. The email chime rang, soft but strange enough to catch my attention. I opened my inbox and saw a name I never thought would appear again. Sienna Hartley. New address, Los Angeles. I sat upright, not angry, not shaking, just curious what someone who had once been confident, to the point of arrogance, might say when everything had burned to ash. I opened the message. The first line made me pause. "I deserve everything that's happened, but I need to say, he lied to both of us. I'm truly sorry, Angela." I read slowly, each word dissolving into the summer breeze that filtered through the room. There was no hatred left, no thrill of victory, just a soft exhale, like setting down something I'd carried far too long. Graham hadn't only betrayed me, he used Sienna as a trophy, a placeholder for his ambition, proof that he was a man who could buy anything. Both of us were deceived by the same man. Both of us thought we were special. I placed my hands on the keyboard, thought for a moment. No lectures, no blame, no revisiting the past. I simply wrote 2 words. Heal yourself? Then I hit send. No punctuation, no signature. I stared at the email, sitting still in the inbox one last second, like watching the final ghost of my old life, then moved the cursor to the corner. Delete. The message disappeared, and I didn't look back. When I stood up, the sun had dipped low behind the seaport rooftops, leaving honey-colored light spilling across the buildings and sparkling on the water's surface. I stepped out onto the balcony, where the breeze from the Charles River carried the crisp scent of cool water and a hint of salt from the distant sea. June in Boston always has a kind of light that's gentle, never harsh, just enough to make you believe everything, one day, will feel warm again. I pulled the wooden chair close to the railing, sat down, let my bare feet rest on the cool stone floor, and let the breeze thread through my hair. Below me, the marina shimmered silver. Far off, the Longfellow Bridge glowed just before sunset. Boston had never looked so beautiful. Or maybe I had never seen it through eyes that were finally, fully free. I opened the mini bottle of champagne I'd chilled earlier, poured it into a clear glass. The golden bubbles fizzed, then faded, catching the evening light like tiny stars floating on water. I raised my glass to eye level. The sunset hit the rim, then reflected off my face, like a signal that the old chapter had finally closed. I didn't toast the past. I didn't toast Graham. I toasted myself. The woman who walked through pain, destroyed no one, and simply returned the truth to where it belonged. In that moment, I smiled and whispered to the dazzling Boston sky, sometimes the sweetest revenge comes wrapped in a Christmas box with a golden bow. And I took a sip of champagne, light, crisp, and freeing. That's where my story ends. But life, it's only just beginning. And that thank you for staying with me through every chapter of this story. If Angela's journey touched your heart, if you've known the kind of pain and loss only a grown woman can truly understand, I hope today's story brought you a bit of warmth, a spark of courage, and a gentle reminder that, no matter your age, you are worthy of love, respect, and a life that feels free. If you believe someone you know needs to hear this, a close friend, a sister, or a woman quietly holding on, feel free to like, subscribe, and share this story with her. Thank you for your time, for your listening, and for being here. Wishing you a peaceful evening.